I was a corpse long before they ever put me in the armor. They called us reclaimers, though there was nothing left in us worth reclaiming. We were the ones who walked where even the frontline infantry refused to tread. We were the hands that sifted through the burned-out husks of cities, searching for bodies too broken to identify yet too important to abandon. We dragged them from ruins, from ash dunes, from collapsed shrines still warm from orbital fire. That was the Imperial job worse than death. It demanded not skill, not strength, but the slow erosion of the soul until nothing human remained. I remember standing in the dust of a dead manufactorum, the banners above me half melted, and wondering when exactly I had stopped being alive. Maybe it was during conscription. Maybe it was during indoctrination. Maybe it was the first time I pulled a child's skeletal hand from rubble and felt nothing. Our faction was called the Obsidian Ordinate, a bureaucratic war creed hidden behind thick prayer books and thicker armor. They believed the dead were holy, for they had fulfilled their purpose without rebellion. It was our duty to make sure every corpse was catalogued, purified, and burned in sanctioned fire. In reality, we were sent into zones still crawling with radiation, still echoing with unseen enemy sappers, still hot from bombardment. The living had trenches, we had tombs. The collapsing megacities we combed through were not battlefields but mausoleums of steel and glass, haunted by the metallic scrape of cooling girders and the hiss of ruptured vents. Every shift began with incense, recited litanies, and the priest's repeated reminder that death was mercy but survival was obligation. My name was Varek, although they discouraged the use of personal names. I held the rank of Ordnance Serf 3rd class, lower middle tier in a system that prided itself on never allowing anyone to rise too high. My role was recovery lead, which meant I was the first to step into unsecured ruins and the last to leave. The personality they bred into us was obedience mixed with fatalistic detachment. We were to feel nothing, fear nothing, mourn nothing. They failed at that last part. I mourned constantly, not for others but for myself. I mourned the man I had been before the Ordinate shackled my mind with doctrine and drowned my memories beneath prayer-coded mantras. Sometimes, when the wind carried the scent of burnt steel just right, I saw flashes of a life I could not fully grasp. Family, a workshop, light without smoke. But the thoughts were always devoured by the shrieking of Vox, blessed hymns that echoed through my helmet whenever my focus wandered. The Reclaimer barracks sat beneath the great engines of the Purity carriers. Those Vox Thunder ships hung over every ruined world like judgment manifest. Their cathedral towers were studded with crimson stained glass windows that depicted saints holding flensed skulls. Servitors dangled from crane chains, dangling incense burners that rained ash-flavored smoke onto the platforms below. I slept in the shadow of those engines for 16 years. The vibration became part of my heartbeat. The sermons became part of my dreams. Every morning, the ritual was the same. Wake, pray, bless your gear with the mark of the Ordinate. Then descend into the wastes. The assignment that broke me, that still echoes in every thought I drag up from the abyss, began on a world the maps labeled Hallowbridge 9 but the soldiers called the Suffocation Sphere. A bioweapon strike had turned its atmosphere into a toxic slur thick enough to chew. Buildings groaned under their own weight, softened by chemical corrosion. Wind carried flecks of metal and bone like drifting pollen. We arrived 3 days after the bombardment ended, 2 days after the soldiers had pulled back. The place was still breathing out its last fumes. We were told to recover an essential asset. That phrase could mean anything. A general, a sealed relic, a data core buried beneath liquefied concrete. All I knew was that the task had already killed 2 other Reclaimer squads. Their corpses were accounted for, according to command, but I had learned that the Ordinate used that phrase even when nothing remained but dust. I remember stepping from the transport, my boots sinking into sludge that hissed as it tried to eat through the outer plating. The sky was a color I never found words for, like bruised amber mixed with the sickly glow of dying reactors. My squad moved behind me in a tight line, their respirators clicking in rhythmic unity. Joran, my second, carried the scanning pylon. He had lost most of his face to rad scarring, and the mask he wore was fused into his jaw. Lisa, our purifier, bore the long-barrel incinerator used to sanctify any remains we found. And behind her were the twins, Merrick and Voss, who rarely spoke and performed their tasks with eerie precision. I had long believed they were damaged clones, but that was speculation forbidden by the Ordinate. We were told not to question. Questioning led to doubt, and doubt led to doctrine failure. The ruins ahead of us looked like the ribs of a giant corpse. Twisted girders jutted from the ground in curved arcs, each one dripping corrosive droplets that hissed when they touched the sludge. Shadows moved inside the hollowed structures, though I could never tell if they were trick of light or something alive. I raised my lantern pole, and its dull blue glow sputtered through the haze. Steps echoed. Metal shifted overhead. My breathing grew heavy as my mind attempted to map the corridors ahead but failed. The city felt alive, not in the way a place should be, but in the way a dying animal twitches after the blade is withdrawn. As we advanced, I felt the slow tightening in my chest that always signaled an old memory trying to surface. It began as a flicker, someone calling my name before the Ordinate took me. The sound of hammering metal in a workshop lit by warm lamps. A voice telling me to run. My mind tried to reach for it, but doctrine surged in to drown it out. A whisper filled my helmet, the autovox repeating the purity code. The mantra stacked itself over my thoughts until the memory sank back into the void. I hated the relief that followed. I hated how the Ordinate had trained us to fear our own minds. We found the first corpses inside what had once been a transport rail station. The chemical storm had peeled their armor like rotten fruit. One figure lay slumped over a collapsed pillar, their helmet melted into their skull. Lisa recited purification rites as she ignited the incinerator. A column of controlled flame washed over the remains, leaving only sterile soot. The smell filtered through my respirator, faint but unmistakable. Burnt bone, burnt identity, burnt history. The Ordinate taught us that fire was absolution, but I often wondered if it was simply another method of erasing what we did not want to remember. Joran's scanner beeped. A faint signal pulsed beneath the collapsed structure. The essential asset was close. The air grew thicker. My visor display flickered. The ground trembled beneath my boots as though something deep in the ruins shifted in its sleep. We cut through the debris carefully, lifting metal plates that sizzled when touched. The twins moved with inhuman coordination, their silent work illuminated only by the glow of our lanterns. When the final slab was removed, I saw it. A sealed stasis capsule, half melted but intact. A crimson sigil on its side, unrecognizable yet clearly important. Frost clung to the edges, though the air around it was hotter than a furnace. The signal someone had died trying to protect. My helmet chimed. Incoming vox from command. Their voice came through distorted, like a priest speaking underwater. Asset located. Maintain integrity. Return capsule to transport immediately. Do not open. Yet standing over that capsule, I felt a pounding in my skull. A voice. A memory. A warning. It pushed against the doctrinal haze like a knife trying to pry open a locked box. Something inside that capsule did not want to be found. Something inside remembered me. The thought should have been impossible. It filled me with a fear I had forgotten how to feel. The ground shook harder. An unseen tremor traveled through the ruins. And then the capsule moved. Not due to impact. Not due to collapse. It moved on its own. My squad froze. My thoughts splintered. And that was when I realized the job we had taken was worse than death, because sometimes the dead were not dead at all. The capsule trembled again. A subtle shift in the metal floor that traveled through my boots like a pulse. For a moment I thought it was the ruins settling. But then the frost along the capsule's edges fractured in a perfect ring, as though something inside had brushed against the interior wall. Joran stepped back, instinct overriding training. Even Lisa, who had incinerated horrors we were never allowed to record, tightened her grip on the purifier's trigger. My own heartbeat fell out of sync with the rhythmic hum of doctrine inside my helmet. Something in that capsule recognized the world outside it. Something inside recognized us. All my training told me to secure it and retreat. Every scar I carried told me to run. Command's voice crackled through the vox, distorted by the chemical atmosphere. Reclaimers, respond. Status of asset. They sounded impatient, as though they sensed deviation. Deviance was sin. Hesitation was sin. Fear was sin. Yet fear crawled up my spine, slow and cold. I forced myself to answer. Asset located. Capsule reacting to environmental destabilization. It was a half-lie, the only kind permitted among the ordinate. There was a pause, then a reply sharpened by doctrinal authority. Stabilize immediately. Do not breach. Retrieval is paramount. The signal died in static, leaving only the sound of distant metal groaning above us. I moved toward the capsule, my lantern pole casting sickly blue light over the sigil etched into its shell. The symbol pulsed faintly beneath the metal as if it were alive. I traced it with my eyes, trying to decipher it, but no scripture from my indoctrination matched its design. It was not one of our saintly runes, not one of the ordinate's sanctified emblems. It was older, deeper, something you carved into a cage, not a shrine. My breath grew heavier. Behind me, Merrick and Voss exchanged a glance, their twin-like stillness breaking for the first time in the entire mission. Even they sensed something here defied doctrine. Joran knelt with the scanning pylon, the machine clicking uncertainly. Life signatures, he rasped through his fused mask. But not steady, like something waking up wrong. His hands trembled, his scarred fingers tapping the pylon in a nervous rhythm. The machine gave another reading that made him recoil. This should be impossible. The person inside is centuries old, but vitals are rising. Lisa stepped closer, the nozzle of her purifier aimed at the capsule. If it breaches, I burn it, she whispered. Her voice was steady, but the fear was there beneath it, smothered under devout training. Purifiers were the most faithful among us, but even faith faltered when faced with something doctrine failed to explain. I placed my gauntlet against the capsule. The metal was cold, far colder than anything else in the ruin. The frost spread under my touch as if responding to my temperature. Then, through the glove, I felt a faint tapping. 1, 2, 3. Pattern. Not random. A deliberate knock. I stepped back, heart pounding. Memories I did not recognize surged in my mind. A workshop. A welded door. Someone trapped inside, pounding in the same rhythm. The memory grew sharper, but then the doctrinal hymns blared in my helmet, drowning it. The ordinate did not allow unauthorized recollection. Memories were carefully curated wounds. Anything outside sanctioned doctrine threatened loyalty. Another knock came, louder this time. The capsule's surface bulged outward by a hair, then relaxed as though something inside shifted position. Voss raised his weapon. Merrick mirrored him. Their unspoken coordination, normally comforting, now terrified me. The ruins around us seemed to breathe in response, exhaling chemical fumes that curled along the floor. My lantern flickered. Shadows crawled along the walls, elongated and twisted by the shifting lights from our suits. The world felt unstable in a way that went beyond physical collapse. "We secure and extract," I said, my voice strained. "No delays." I reached for the lifting clamps on my back. The twins prepared the harness. Joran tried stabilizing the readings. Lisa maintained fire discipline. Every movement was drilled into us through years of brutal training. But something inside me whispered that protocol would not save us. Something about this capsule was wrong. Something about this capsule knew me. We clasped the harness around the capsule, the metal humming as it connected to the clamps. The capsule shuddered again, harder this time, nearly tipping. Merrick caught it. Voss braced the other side. My helmet display flickered violently, static drowning my view. Through the haze, I saw a distorted shape inside the capsule. Just a silhouette, curled and shaking. My breath caught, not because of its form, but because I recognized the movement. A subtle twitch of the hand, a tilt of the head, an instinctual posture. I had seen it before in a memory I was not allowed to keep. A sudden explosion cracked through the ruins. The floor buckled. Metal shrieked overhead. A beam crashed down where we had stood moments earlier, crushing broken tiles beneath it. The tremor rippled outward, knocking us off balance. The capsule slid across the floor, sparks flying as it scraped metal. I lunged, catching the harness. The twins grabbed my arms, anchoring me. Chemical fumes leaked from ruptured pipes, swirling around us in toxic clouds. Somewhere deeper in the ruins, something growled. Not an animal, not a machine, something caught between life and decay. "We have to move," Joran rasped. His mask ventilated violently, struggling against the cloud. "This entire sector is collapsing." Lisa swung her purifier to cover the shadows, flames sputtering with each breath. The ruins vibrated like a throat preparing to speak. I secured the capsule to my back, the weight dragging me down. Felt like a coffin full of gravity. Each step was labor. Each breath tasted like rust filtered through fear. As we retreated through the half-collapsed corridors, the capsule shifted again. Not violently, slowly, intentionally, like a sleeper adjusting to a dream. My spine arched with the movement, my muscles straining under the weight. Then a whisper filled my helmet. Not vox static, not doctrine. A voice, soft, familiar, broken by age and containment. "Varric." I froze. My team nearly collided with me. My heart hammered so loud it drowned out even the machine prayers in my ear. The voice had said my name. My real name. The name I had nearly forgotten. The name the Ordinate had tried to scrub clean when they reforged my mind into obedient compliance. I swallowed hard, but the voice returned, weaker than before. A single word. A plea. "Help." Fear crawled up my throat, choking me. My squad noticed my paralysis. Joran limped toward me, his mask hissing. "What is it?" he asked. I couldn't answer. If I spoke the truth, doctrine would deem it heresy. If I stayed silent, my mind would fracture under the weight of what I'd heard. The ruins moaned again, drowning the sound. My legs moved on their own, forcing me forward. But the voice in the capsule did not fade. It grew more insistent, threading itself through every thought. I had spent 16 years recovering the dead, but this was the first time one of them had spoken to me. The voice inside the capsule did not repeat my name, but its echo lingered in my skull like a bruise pressed from the inside. Every step I took sent a pulse of cold through my spine, as though the capsule were binding itself to me. My squad marched ahead through the decaying corridors, their movements mechanical, their breaths distorted by the atmosphere leaking through weakened filters. I forced myself to move, but my mind spiraled. The indoctrination hymns tried to smother the memory of the voice. They failed. It clung to me with a familiarity that terrified me more than any battlefield horror. The ruins groaned above us. Chemical wind howled through shattered archways. Every metallic creak sounded like the bones of a titan shifting in its grave. Joran limped ahead, the scanning pylon flickering with static as it tried to navigate the unstable terrain. "Radiation spike to the west," he muttered. "We need to reroute through the lower tunnels." Lower tunnels meant older structures, many predating Imperial conquest. They were unpredictable, labyrinthine, sometimes haunted by whatever lived beneath dead cities after wars stripped them bare. But we had no choice. The capsule's weight dragged at my shoulders as though it wanted me to fail, to collapse, to drop it so it could crawl free. We descended a broken stairwell, the steps slick with corrosive residue. Lisa took point, purifier held in a ready stance. Merrick and Voss flanked her, their synced movements unnervingly smooth. The chemical fog thickened as we moved deeper, turning the lantern light into a hazy blue veil. The deeper we went, the more oppressive the air became. The tunnels breathed, their walls expanding and contracting with the shifting pressure. I felt the capsule's vibrations more clearly now, like a heartbeat struggling to sync with mine. Halfway down the stairwell, I staggered. The voice whispered again. A single word. Fragile. Unsteady. Cold. I clenched my jaw, trying to force the doctrinal hymns louder in my mind. But the capsule's occupant, whatever they were, pressed their presence into me with the intimacy of memory. Images flashed behind my eyes, sparks flying from a welding torch, a small workshop cluttered with metal parts, someone laughing, a hand on my shoulder. Then, as always, the indoctrination surged, smashing the memory apart like glass under a hammer. I nearly fell with the force of it. The twins steadied me without speaking. Their masks concealed any emotion, but their grip was firm, almost gentle. They knew something was wrong. They always sensed deviations even before the indoctrinated mind admitted them. Lisa glanced back. "You're faltering," she said, her voice sharpened by suspicion. "Are your filters compromised?" The ordinate demanded perfection. Any crack in discipline was treated as a disease that needed excision. I shook my head. "Just the weight. We keep moving." The lower tunnels opened into a cavernous substructure. An old cathedral hollowed out by the chemical storm. Stained glass shards littered the floor like frozen tears. Columns leaned at unnatural angles. Their engravings melted into grotesque shapes. The ceiling was lost in shadow, but the faint glow of our lanterns revealed flickers of movement far above. Maybe debris, maybe something else. The air was colder here, unnatural compared to the heat above. Frost formed around the cracks of my respirator. The capsule shuddered against my back, pressing into me as though trying to reach the frost itself. Joran examined the structure with a trembling hand. "This place shouldn't exist," he murmured. "The maps show only support tunnels. No cathedral." The twins scanned the walls, their helmets turning in perfect unison. Lisa approached an altar-like slab at the room's center. It was scorched black, as though fire had erupted from beneath it long ago. She touched the surface with her gauntlet and drew back instantly. "Warm," she whispered. "Burning warm." Before we could investigate further, the ground trembled violently. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. A fractured pipe burst, releasing a stream of toxic vapor that hissed like a serpent. Shadows danced across the far wall as something massive shifted behind it. Merrick and Voss raised their rifles, scanning for threats. The ruins answered with another deep groan, like a dying city refusing to let us leave. Then the capsule on my back lurched. Not a twitch, not a tremor, a violent movement, as though something inside threw itself against the wall. The impact drove me to my knees. My vision blurred. Alarms blared through my helmet. The internal clamps screeched under the strain, warning that the capsule was moments from breaching. Lisa swung her purifier toward me, flame igniting with a roar. "If it opens, I burn it," she declared, unwavering. Her faith was absolute. Her terror was buried beneath it, but I could hear it in her breath. The voice came again, clearer, strong enough to cut through doctrine. "Varek, don't let them." I froze. Every part of me froze. My heart skipped. The twins turned to look at me, their masks unreadable. Joran stepped back, eyes widening behind his cracked visor. Lisa's finger tightened on the trigger, but she hesitated, just for a moment. That moment stretched into eternity as the voice continued, gaining strength as though feeding on my panic. "I know you. I know what they took from you." My throat tightened. Pain flooded my mind, raw and unfiltered. Flashes of memory cut through the indoctrination like shards of shrapnel. A young man with burned hands teaching me how to weld. A worn jacket. A promise whispered during the drafting riots. "If they take you, I'll find you." Warmth, hope, fear. A name I could almost grasp before doctrine crushed it again. The capsule shifted once more, and then cracked. A hairline fracture stretched across its surface, glowing faintly with internal frost. Vapor spilled from the gap, curling like a dying breath. Lisa recoiled, raising her purifier. "It's breaching," she shouted. "Stand clear." The twins took position. Joran limped behind a broken pillar. My body refused to move. My mind screamed to obey protocol, to drop the capsule, to let the purifier reduce everything inside to ash. But my heart moved before my training did. I shielded the capsule with my body. Lisa screamed in fury. "Varek, stand back." "That's an order." The twins started toward me, ready to force compliance. Joran shouted something incoherent through his failing mask. The ruins trembled again, dust falling like dead snow. The whisper became a voice. The voice became a memory. And the memory became a truth I was not prepared to face. "Varek, it's me." The capsule's crack widened. Cold rushed out, and the face of the person I once loved pressed against the fractured glass. The face behind the fractured glass was pale with the frost of stasis, but alive enough for recognition to strike like a blade. Eyes I had forgotten stared back at me, wide with desperation. Lips cracked with cold formed a shape I remembered but was not allowed to acknowledge. My knees nearly buckled. This could not be real. The ordinate had scraped my memories clean, polished my mind until only obedience remained. Yet here stood the proof that something had survived the purge. Not a dream, not a hallucination. Person, a living piece of my stolen past. Lisa screamed through her respirator, a sound as sharp as the purifier's roaring flame. "Move aside, Varric." Her voice quivered with contained panic. She feared what she did not understand, and nothing terrified the faithful more than the unclean unknown. Merrick and Voss advanced slowly, their weapons raised, their movements precise enough to show they would kill me if doctrine required it. Joran tried to stabilize the pylon, but the machine flared with error runes that reflected off his damaged visor like ghostly sigils. The capsule's crack widened. Frost crawled across my armor. I felt it reach my skin, numbing everything it touched. A web of fractures spread outward, each one accompanied by a whisper of escaping pressure. The person inside pressed their hand against the glass, fingers trembling, palm sinking slightly into the frost. My chest tightened with the weight of 1,000 memories I was not permitted to own. I reached toward the glass despite every instinct screaming to stop. Behind my squad's fear, the ruins groaned in what sounded like warning. Pipes bulged, metal snapped. A choir of shifting steel echoed through the cathedral-like chamber. The air pressure dipped, then surged, distorting our lanterns. Shadows stretched and twisted, becoming elongated shapes that seemed almost alive. Something in the deep foundation of the structure pulsed, responding to the capsule's awakening. Lisa surged forward, incinerator aimed squarely at the capsule. Varric, step away. It is a contamination risk. It is a doctrinal threat. It is not human. Her conviction was unshaken, but her voice was strained as though she were fighting her own fear of disobedience. Purifiers were taught that loyalty trumped compassion. They burned infants, saints, and soldiers alike if doctrine commanded it. Lisa would burn me without hesitation if she believed it was necessary. My voice cracked inside my helmet. "It's not a contagion." The words came out before I could stop them. "It's a person." Saying that was a heresy in itself. The twins stopped advancing for a fraction of a second. That tiny pause saved all of us. The capsule exploded outward, not violently, but with a soft collapse. The glass shattered inward in a slow-motion bloom of ice and shards, as though the stasis field had finally surrendered. A wave of freezing vapor surged around me. The figure inside tumbled into my arms, weightless from long confinement. Their breath was shallow, their heartbeat fragile. Their eyes flickered with recognition, not of doctrine, not of rank, but of me. They whispered something I could not hear over Lisa's scream. The purifier roared. A column of fire surged toward us. Instinct overrode indoctrination. I dove behind a fallen pillar with the half-conscious figure clutched against my chest. The flame washed over the stone, turning frost into steam. The air sizzled. The ruins echoed with Lisa's frantic shouts. "Varric is compromised. The asset is heretical. Burn it. Burn both." Merrick and Voss surrounded her, uncertain. Their masks tilted toward me. They waited for orders, waiting for doctrine, waiting to decide whether I lived or died. The person in my arms trembled violently. Their skin burned ice cold. Their breath stuttered. Their fingers gripped the plates of my armor. When they spoke, their voice was nothing more than a ragged whisper, frayed by years of silence. "You left me." The words nearly stopped my heart, because they weren't an accusation. They were a memory, one that had survived indoctrination, one the ordinate had failed to erase. I saw us in a cramped workshop bathed in warm yellow light. The world outside was loud with riots and drafts and punishments for dissent. We were young. We were terrified. We made a promise. If one of us were taken, the other would find them. A simple vow whispered through tears and fear. A vow I had forgotten until this moment. The memory shattered as the ruins shook violently. A deep rumble tore through the chamber. The ground beneath us peeled open in a jagged split. Steam and chemical vapor burst upward. The cathedral trembled like a beast trying to shake free from its own bones. Joran was thrown off balance, the pylon flying from his grasp. It clattered across the floor and fell into the crevice with a distant clang. "Structural collapse," he gasped. "We have to get out." Lisa moved to incinerate the figure again, but Merrick grabbed her arm. Voss blocked her path. For the first time, the twins defied direct doctrinal priority. Lisa shrieked with fury. "They are both corrupted. Protocol demands eradication." Her mask hid her face, but I could hear something crack inside her. Fear, confusion, rage. Purifiers were not trained to handle doubt. The figure in my arms clung tighter. Their breath grew steadier, as though warmth from my body fought the last remnants of stasis. They opened their eyes again, hollow, frost-burned, but unmistakably human. "Don't let them take me," they whispered. "Not again." In that moment, choice ceased to be an option. Doctrine wanted me to let Lisa burn us both. Memory wanted me to protect the only piece of myself the Ordinate had failed to destroy. I rose slowly, shielding the figure with my body. The twins took a hesitant step back. Joran watched with wide eyes, torn between fear and belief. Lisa raised her purifier, her hands shaking. "Varek," she said, her voice cracking from the strain. "Don't force me to kill you." The ruins cracked again. A massive section of ceiling tore free and fell between us with a deafening crash. Dust swept through the chamber like a suffocating wave. Lanterns flickered and died. The ground heaved as though something beneath it was waking up, responding to the capsule's breach. When the dust settled, a wall of rubble separated us from Lisa entirely. The room plunged into near darkness. The person in my arms whispered one final word that changed everything. "Run." The rubble sealed Lisa away, but her screams still pierced through the cracks. She howled doctrine as though it were a weapon, shouting prayers meant to purge doubt and fear. Those prayers were meant for herself, not us. The twins stared at the fallen debris with a stillness that felt almost reverent. Joran's breathing rasped behind his mask as he limped toward me, his wide, frightened eyes fixed on the half-conscious figure in my arms. We were trapped in the cathedral's core, surrounded by collapsing stone and metal that shivered with every tremor. Yet the person I carried, the one the Ordinate had hidden inside a stasis tomb, gave off a warmth now, faint but growing, as though the cold of centuries was thawing into life. The ground rumbled again, sending cracks crawling across the cathedral floor. Pipes burst like veins under pressure, vomiting toxic vapor that swirled with sickly light. The walls groaned with unnatural rhythm, a deep, pulsing throb like a massive heart buried in the stone. Something in this ruin recognized the capsule's awakening. Something old, something silent until now. Joran's voice trembled through the static in my helmet. "We need to ascend. Upper levels might still be intact." He paused. "If anything above still exists." The twins stepped to my sides without speaking, their weapons raised as if they expected the shadowed ceiling to attack us. They were shifting, reorienting their loyalty without announcing it. Doctrine taught them to follow strength, not guilt. And in their eyes, I still held the strength to lead. I adjusted the figure in my arms, feeling their breath grow steadier. Their skin was warming. Their eyes, though exhausted, burned with a focus that pulled threads from memories long buried. I didn't remember their name, but I remembered the way they looked at me, as though I had always been theirs to find. We moved through the cathedral, lanterns sputtering in the toxic fog. The stained glass murals above us were warped by chemical corrosion. Their saints melted into grotesque blurs of suffering. Purity seals dripped wax like dried blood. Incense urns swung from broken chains, their smoke twisted into spirals by the poisoned wind. Every step I took sent pain shooting up my legs. The capsule's breach had drained me. My armor's internal systems faltered, and warning runes flickered crimson across my visor. But the figure clinging to me radiated a subtle energy, warmth fighting cold, memory fighting doctrine. As we reached a slanted hallway, the floor shook violently. A deep roar echoed through the structure, so low it rattled my ribs. The lights in our helmets flickered. Dust fell like gray snow, and from the depths beneath the cathedral, I heard scraping metal dragging across stone in slow, deliberate strokes. Merrick and Voss raised their weapons toward the darkness. Joran's pylon was gone, swallowed by the fissure earlier, but he crouched low, scanning the shadows. "Something is moving down there," he whispered. A chill crawled up my spine. The voice inside my memory, the one doctrine couldn't erase, spoke again in my head, unbidden. This place was never dead. I felt the figure's hand tighten weakly on my armor. Their voice came out soft and hoarse. The ordinate built over something they feared. I stared at them, startled. Words formed in my mind, not entirely mine. "How do you know?" Their eyelids fluttered. "Because they took me from here." The ground erupted. A section of the floor tore open as a massive metallic appendage, twisted with wires, pipes, and bone, lunged upward. It was not a creature in the living sense. It was a corpse of machinery animated by something wrong, something ancient, something that pulsed in time with the cathedral's heartbeat. The limb crashed down where Joran had just stood. He threw himself aside, his damaged mask hissing as his breath hitched. The twins opened fire, their rifles spitting superheated rounds that tore chunks from the writhing structure. But it didn't bleed. It didn't recoil. It simply retracted, then slammed forward again. I stumbled backward, shielding the figure in my arms. My armor groaned, systems failing. The creature, or machine, or whatever fusion of weapon and corpse it had become, pulled itself farther through the gap. Its surface was covered in melted armor plates, half-burned purity seals, and skulls fused into cables. A large ocular lens blinked open, glowing with hateful red light. It wasn't a beast. It was a remnant, a battlefield construct abandoned centuries ago and awakened by the capsule's breach. Joran shouted through the static. "It's drawn to heat signatures." The twins shifted their fire. The creature roared, a sound like a reactor venting violently. I felt warmth building in the figure's chest, unnatural warmth, alive and growing. Their presence was calling the machine toward us. I ducked as the limb smashed down, cracking the stone inches from my head. The figure whispered against my chest. "We need to get above. It won't follow where there's light." I didn't question how they knew. I simply ran. The twins covered our retreat, firing bursts that slowed the machine's advance. Joran limped beside me, coughing blood inside his mask. We reached a maintenance ladder twisted by corrosion. I strapped the figure onto my back with the harness, my arms shaking with exhaustion, then began the climb. The metal burned my palms through the gauntlets. Every rung felt like the last my body could endure. Below us, the machine screeched and clawed at the gap, struggling to pull its bulk through. Merrick climbed behind me, Voss behind him. Joran followed last, wheezing. The ruins shook again, harder this time. A beam fell from above, smashing the floor below and blocking the machine's advance, for now. I climbed faster. The figure's cold fingers brushed the back of my neck armor. Their breath warmed the side of my helmet. Then they whispered words I had not heard since before the ordinate erased my life. "Your name wasn't always Varric." My grip faltered. The ladder rung dug painfully into my palm. My breath stuttered. "Stop," I whispered. "Not now." The figure shook their head weakly. "They took everything from you, but they could not take what you promised." Memories flickered again, rapid and blinding. A workshop, a vow whispered beneath falling ash. Hands clasped, trembling with fear. A name I almost spoke aloud. We reached the top of the ladder. The hatch above groaned as I forced it open, its hinges screaming in protest. Warm air hit my face, warmer than the freezing cathedral below. It smelled of smoke, rust, and ozone. The upper level was collapsing, but it was brighter, lit by the fractured glow of distant fires. Structural beams lay in heaps. Shattered walls leaned inward like dying giants. The entire city was unraveling. The twins climbed through. Joran hauled himself up, gasping. Then the hatch behind us buckled. The machine roared again from below and raged at losing its prey. Joran staggered to his feet. "We need to move. The extraction point is north. If it hasn't sunk yet." Merrick and Voss glanced at me for orders. My mind should have recited doctrine, should have prioritized asset recovery and squad integrity, should have suppressed memory at all costs. But every time I looked at the figure, the one who had known me before indoctrination, I felt something break and reshape inside my mind. Not rebellion, not betrayal, recognition. I took a breath that felt like inhaling fire. "We move," I said. Ahead of us, the ruins groaned like a dying world. Behind us, something ancient clawed its way upward. And in my arms, the last piece of my forgotten life whispered my real name. The upper levels groaned as though the entire city realized we were trying to escape. Every corridor leaned at unnatural angles, bent by bombardment and chemical decay. Walls bulged inward as if something massive pressed on them from the outside. Smoke drifted through broken vents in thin gray ribbons, carrying the scent of melted steel and scorched bone. My helmet's warning runes flashed relentlessly. Oxygen low, armor integrity failing, internal temperature unstable. But none of those alarms mattered compared to the steady, fragile breathing of the person clinging to my back. The figure who had remembered my true name, whatever it was, had grown warmer, stronger. Their breath no longer rattled. Their fingers no longer trembled. Stasis had taken centuries from them, but memory had not. And as we staggered across the broken platform above the cathedral, they whispered a single sentence that pushed doctrine to the edge of collapse. "They lied to you, to all of us. You weren't conscripted. You were taken." The words cut through me like shrapnel. I felt my steps falter. Joran called out ahead, "Move, Varric. No time to stop." His mask vented in wet, sick bursts. He was dying from the fumes, and we all knew it. Merrick and Voss covered the flanks, rifles raised toward the shifting fog. They had accepted my leadership without a word. Doctrine didn't prepare them for heresy from within, and in the absence of clear direction, they followed the strongest voice. That voice was no longer Lisa's. It was mine. We reached the edge of a ruptured pressure corridor. The long metallic hallway stretched ahead, partially intact, lit by flickering red emergency lights. Steam vented in violent bursts from broken pipes. Pools of corrosive runoff spread across the floor like glistening oil. The corridor led toward the north platform, the only route that might still connect to the extraction spire. The ruins trembled behind us. The machine creature from below had not given up. Its metallic shriek tore through the air. The rubble blocking the hatch clattered as though something enormous slammed against it. Joran cursed. "It's climbing. Emperor preserve us." A tremor rippled across the floor. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Merrick looked back through the haze, gripping his weapon tighter. Voss mirrored him. Their masks hid their fear, but I could feel it in their movements. We pressed into the pressure corridor. The lights flickered overhead. Steam billowed thickly, turning the air into choking fog. The metal walls were scored with claw marks that did not belong to any Imperial tool. Something had been here long before the ordinate arrived. Something the capsule's breach had reawakened. The figure on my back whispered faintly, "This was a research hold once, before they buried it, before they made it a tomb." Their voice carried knowledge they shouldn't have, knowledge doctrine forbade, knowledge only someone present before the purge could possess. My stomach twisted. What were they researching? I asked. Their answer chilled me. People. Merrick paused ahead. Voss stopped beside him. Joran stumbled to a halt. The silence in the corridor grew heavy. The walls groaned. The figure continued, each word a knife in the gut of the Ordinate's myths. They studied what the mind remembers after trauma, how to control it, how to erase it. Their hand clutched the back of my armor. You were one of their first subjects. My breath caught. Fire surged behind my eyes. Memories flashed. Chains, a bright surgical lamp, a needle dripping with silver fluid, a voice promising that pain would make me loyal. The indoctrination hymns in my helmet tried to rise, but they sputtered like dying machinery. The truth slammed into me with the weight of a lifetime stolen. I wasn't just conscripted, I was made. The tremors intensified. Something large smashed into the corridor's far end. Metal tore open with an ear-splitting shriek. A massive shadow lurched forward, dragging cables and bone-fused limbs. The machine creature pulled itself into view, its ocular lens glowing hatred red. Joran screamed, "Run!" We ran. Merrick and Voss unleashed coordinated fire. Round after round tore into the creature's armor, but it only slowed. Its limbs smashed into walls, tearing pipes free. Steam burst around us like explosive fog. I carried the figure, legs burning with pain, lungs tearing from toxic breath. Joran limped ahead, coughing violently. His mask cracked. Blood seeped from the edges. The corridor buckled under the machine's weight. A pair of limbs shot forward, striking the floor where we had just been. The shockwave threw Joran off his feet. He slid across the floor and collided with a ruptured pipe. His mask shattered. Toxic vapor engulfed him. He screamed once, cut short by choking gurgles. Then he went still. Merrick and Voss hesitated for a fraction of a second, then ran on. Doctrine taught them to leave the dead. The living mattered only if they served the mission. I felt the old indoctrination push me to accept Joran's death without emotion. But my heart rebelled. My heart remembered the man Joran had been. Scarred, faithful, terrified of his own doubts. A friend in the only way the ordinate allowed. The machine roared again, dragging itself closer. We reached the far end of the corridor, the exit hatch leading to the extraction platform. Or what remained of it. The platform was half collapsed, hanging from twisted beams over a chasm filled with molten chemical runoff. The extraction spire loomed in the distance, tilted but intact. If we could reach it, we could signal the purity carriers. If they chose to extract us. If Lisa hadn't already branded us heretics. Merrick stepped onto the leaning platform. Voss followed. I crossed last, the figure on my back breathing weakly into my helmet. The metal groaned beneath our weight. The chasm spat boiling fumes upward. The machine slammed into the corridor behind us, its mass shattering the hatch frame. Fire burst from broken conduits. The platform sank several inches. The machine lumbered forward. Merrick fired until his weapon overheated. Voss did the same. Neither slowed it. Its ocular lens focused on me, on the figure I carried, on the truth the ordinate had buried. I stepped back. The platform creaked. Metal gave way beneath my heel. My balance wavered. Then, the figure whispered into my ear, voice steady for the first time. "Say it." My mind reeled. "Say what?" "Your real name." I hesitated. Doctrine screamed. Indoctrination fought to drown the memory. But the truth rose like a sun from beneath the ocean. A name. My name. The one I had before they made me Varric. Caius. The platform shuddered. The machine shrieked. The figure gripped me tighter. "You promised you would find me," they whispered. "Now I'm finding you." The machine lunged. I activated the last charge in my armor, a directional blast meant for clearing rubble. It detonated beneath my boots, launching me and the figure across the gap toward the extraction spire. Merrick and Voss leaped aside as debris erupted. The machine roared, its bulk tumbling downward into the molten chasm. The spire platform caught us hard. Pain shot through my body. My visor cracked. I shielded the figure with my arms. My armor nearly shattered around us. Merrick and Voss landed beside us, both stunned but alive. The extraction beacon lay flickering nearby. I crawled toward it. My fingers trembled. The figure whispered, "Caius, you're free." I activated the beacon. The purity carriers would be here soon. But I no longer knew whether they would rescue us or finish the job the ordinate began.